All right, hello. This is lesson number 4, where we're adding value through shading. And so today we're going to look at the pressure control with our pencil to add value. We're going to look at how we're going to add shading smoothly, and we're going to look at how we understand how light behaves and how it reflects. So we're going to look at how things reflect off a ball. So first I want you guys to start off. What you'll need for this activity is just a pencil, a sketchbook, and a piece of paper. I want you to, and a ruler, I would like you guys to measure out a scale of boxes. Doesn't really need to be how many you want, but this is going to be your value scale. We're going to learn how to pressure our pencil down harder to create a darker value and lighter to create lighter. So we're going to go from dark to light. So I know my first one, I know I'm going to push the hardest I can. The second one, I'm not going to push as dark. Second one, really letting up the pressure of my hand. And you're going to continue doing this all the way through. If you're noticing that you're not really getting a really big transition, then you might want to go back and start from left to right instead. Now, if you can't see a big difference, you might want to go back and even make it darker and make the other one a little bit darker and try to see if you can get your boxes a little bit more. Now, that is value scale through a box. I also want you to try to do a value scale just gradiently without using the boxes. So I'm going to start with light to dark. If you're noticing, I'm doing very even strokes throughout, so I'm getting a very consistent level of color there. Awesome. So that's your first thing I want you guys to do, is to create a value scale. So now we're going to draw an apple from our imagination based off our knowledge of light reflecting from objects. So first, when I start off, I'm going to use this scale to help me draw this apple. But first, I'm going to start off by just trying to draw a circle. Trying to get the circle, an outline of an apple. Right. It's okay if it's rough right now. I don't mind if it's rough. All right, so then I'm going to give it a plane, so I'm going to have it sit on a table. Now I'm going to decide where my light source is coming from. Now, depending on where your light source is coming from, that's going to completely determine how your value changes and where your light and darkness fades, just like your value scale. So I'm going to have my light source be coming up from the left corner. All right. So by having your light source come up from the left corner, you now know where your light's going to hit your object and where the shadow is going to cast. So I'm going to draw from my light shadow the dotted line where I think it would hit my object. Now, by having the flashlight sort of rays coming down, showing you where your object is, you now know where to put your shadow. So starting from here, right there, you're gonna go all the way that line. All right. So now I have an apple on a table with a shadow going. So now I know where my light source is. The next step you're going to do is you're going to determine where the light side is and where the shadow side is. So I know that just by knowing where the light is, this will be my light and this will be my shadow. Right? So you know from here down, it's going to be darker from here up. Okay? So a lot of times if you wanted to, you could draw your apple straight dark and then light. And you can gradiently take away with the eraser or gradiently do shading. It's another method. Awesome. So the next way is you're going to find what we call a core shadow. When light reflects off an object, it usually reflects off the table and back onto the object. So you're going to notice the darkest part of this apple is actually where this line divides the light and the dark. And that is what we call your core shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Now if you're noticing, I'm just shading back and forth. Just trying to get a value in. So if I had to choose one, that would be, we're going to number this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would say that one's about a 6, right? So you can start to measure your shading that way. Awesome. Now I'm going to start to think about the bottom and where my shadow lies down here. I'm going to start to shade because I know the reflection off the table is the darkest. I know that's going to stay dark. Now everything in between, you can now make it a mid-tone range. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that mid-tone range in there. So again, we have our shadow on the bottom right here that's really dark, and our core shadow in the middle that's really dark. Now you can go back, and I would like you to gradient this value scale to here. Now you can see it's kind of choppy where it's dark here, a little light here, and dark here. Try to make it fade into another a little more, right? So we're just fading. So if I had to say that would probably be a 4 to a 5 to a 6, a 4 to a 5 to a 6 if we're looking back up at my scale. Awesome. Now we're going to think about the shadow down here. Now, when you cast a shadow onto a surface, that shadow isn't always all black, right? So we're going to start by having it be a little black and fade into lightness. So just like the gradient scale here, we're going to fade that in. All right? So now we got the light side to do. You want to go that way. So now we have the light side to do. So now I'm going to come back and I know that this is going to be a lighter shade than this right here. We said this is what, about a 4? So let's try and make this about a 2 or a 3. So even though I know my word light is in there, I'm going to really make sure. So we got a light and our dark. Now this is a time where you go back and you start to really fade the value scale. So it gives it. Another thing, next thing you'll do is you're going to add highlights. By adding highlights, you're going to use an eraser. Back of an eraser works well, but I like these erasers because they have a nice tip. So you can always come back, start to think about what your highlights are. And the final step is to really just sit here and to really mess around with it, right? To really take it and to really make it a scale from 1 to 7. What if you make it a scale from 1 to 14, right? So you have 14 different scales of value. So you can really change that value range, right? So that is how we add value through shading. All right. Thank you.